Everybody. Yep, so my name is Chris. I've been working with Angular for a few years now, professionally with work and with some side projects. And this is my first talk. I've actually been coming here for quite a while. Know about Krill and especially Daniel from Google. They basically have the Google office where they'll basically have other meetups. So today I had the option to just talk about something I've been focusing on, and that's like the routing and navigation. So before I start, how many people here are actually familiar with the Angular router? Okay. How many people actually work with it every day? Okay, all right. Well, basically with the Angular router, I've went ahead and had to kind of relearn. We did versions like Angular. Oh, this is some of my social media where you can find out where I'm at and the project I'm actually going to work on today, which is it's a GitHub Explorer app. So I usually use the GitHub API to kind of just render some of the views using the Angular router. And I want to just maybe break down some of the basics on how to get your routing navigation set up and some of the things I ran into and I was able to overcome because of how this new router has been implemented. Okay. All right, so first off, without routing and navigation, you have, you're configuring your routes, using your auto outlet, deciding on whether you will use lazy loading children, or even if you want to contribute more routing modules. That whole idea about using routing and navigation is more intuitive to me. And when I had to go ahead and build the GitHub Explorer app, there was a few things that I kind of used that made it much easier. So for instance, let me see if I can go ahead. Actually, if you guys are actually able to use the meetup, I posted a link to the slides. So if you can't see everything from up here, you'll be able to see it from the link personally on your phone or whatever. All right, so basically how it works is that I take advantage of the GitHub API's Git popular repos service. And then I basically sort them for the most starred, basically creating the top repos view. Then after that, there's a repo view that basically allows all of the repository specific details to be rendered and displayed on the page. And next is also, if you wanted to go ahead and click on the user, you can click on the user's picture or the user's name and be routed to the user's profile. On that, there'll be an extra load children route basically for all of the events or files of that particular user. The other thing is actually setting up the routing modules. So as you know, when you have a application that you're having to route many different things onto the view, you want to make sure that you have specific components set up for particular modules so that way they're loading in properly. So for instance, you have the route routing module. I changed the name. It makes more sense to me when I'm looking through my app relative to app routing module. And then you have the user routing module, which is basically the module that basically carries all of the components, tools, like the pipes, or using any types, or even just all the styling in the component views. And then we have the repo routing module, which is basically particular to that view. The user routing module and the repo routing module are both easily loaded in. Given that application is the top view. So what about the route configuration? Right here, basically going to just talk a little bit more about how the routing is actually set up. There's a cool library that's the CompoDoc that allows you to basically auto-generate your application's actual mapping of how the routing is done. And the map that you see over here is, I'll be getting back to that. That basically shows you like how your route's being done and how it's where your app is actually going when you click on different parts of it. So as you know, with the basic Angular routing configuration, you have importing your router module. Then you have defined the routes for your first route, for root routes. Then you have to worry about the router outlet where you're going to be viewing these particular views. And then you have to worry about the base href, which is basically placed at the top of your index.html file. Then you decide whether you're going to use load children components. For my case, I had to use 2. And then you have the RouterLink, which helps you to navigate your route utilizing the router module. Now here I have just a snapshot of Compo Docs, which I kind of use for the documentation, which gives you an opportunity to see where your route is, where your app is going, and how things are actually laid out. If you were able to go ahead and access the link that is actually in the meetup, you'll be able to see this much closer. And but as I move forward, you'll be able to see more about what's going on in each part of it. But for right now, the routes are actually just displayed on here based on how they are laid out in the application. So we have the route routing module. As you can see, when you're basically setting up your routes for the first time, I have set up the top repos component. It's basically at the root of the page. And then based on the different paths, we will change and then laser load in those particular the particular modules based on the path's name. Now, moving on to the next one, which is the repo routing module, which is basically going to wait for 2 variables basically coming from the service, the HTTP purpose that we created, which is basically going to have the owner and the name. Based on those names, it generates that page and then displays that particular component. So basically the owner of the repo and the name of the repo, and then that basically shows that view. So this allows you to continuously build your, well, not continuously build, but pretty much continues to allow your application to kind of check out infinite loops of different repositories without having to worry too much about having to create a specific page for each one, because we want to work with dynamic, development. Let me see. Let me go ahead. Now for the child routes, is basically the second one. This is basically when we move into a user profile. You'll see that the user profile will have several different events happening, where we will have when they're clicked, they will basically create another view, and that's basically on the side page. Is there a way for me to, let me see. I want to bring that up. Clone Firebase app. Yeah, so I'm actually going to load up the app right now so you can basically see it. So if you guys have your phones or not, github-clone.firebaseapp.com. So you can basically see now when I was talking about this particular route, the user routing route. When you go ahead and you click on certain parts of it, like for instance, we click on the user here, it routes you to the user profile, and then here, as each one is clicked on, that's when we actually are viewing that particular component's view. And we have a router outlet for this particular component, this particular part of the view, which is, for instance, this particular view will basically have its own specific router outlet for these components. And then if you want to go ahead and check out this particular view, it will take you here to that particular, this will be the repo view, and then you'll be able to see the components and the children of this particular view. And then if you want to go ahead and come back, it basically simulates this, this application, like how we would say it. It would basically simulate like this applications like within the browser. Let me see, now let me go back to, all right. So now, suppose if you want to go ahead and use authentication. So that's since Route Guards is a way of doing that. So Route Guards is actually, you can create a service, or now with Angular CLI, you can generate a boilerplate for your guards right from the command line. And utilizing can activate allows you to do these three things. So for one thing is that it allows you to add logic before Angular actually loads the route. And then you can use the can activate function to basically return like either as a Boolean or observable Boolean. Depending on what you actually need, you can actually take advantage of these using one without the other. You can also use a promise, but I won't get too, that's out of the scope for right now. But focusing on this, you can also have multiple guards. What does that actually mean? That's actually if you have multiple things you want to make sure the user has before they can see that route. I actually like that you're able to write this out. For instance, in this particular page here, I have a very simple auth guard that basically most of the code was generated from the Angular CLI, except for the fact that to simulate the login, I would basically just have, just basically math random, just like change it every every other like 5%, 50% of the time. So, and with this basically placed inside in your application, you can see that there's some sort of like, you can mimic the login because of, I didn't actually go ahead and do that for this particular piece here, but so if for this particular one, if you want to go ahead and see that, you would click on the repository here, it would basically check that. How am I doing on time? Okay. Let me see. Let's move on to the next one. All right. So problems I had to overcome for this project. One of the things about this project was that I wanted to kind of actually find something to talk about and be able to, I guess, address it clearly without having to spend so much time for it. So I started with the actual talk by submitting the application to actually him to talk about this with Daniel and the Angular meetup crew, and every day I just like spent more and more time with it. So if you go ahead and you go to my GitHub repository, you'll be able to see like every day I actually build like different pieces, and then when I run into a problem, I would usually like explain it. And this is one of the things that I do like about Angular, because it allows you to not overthink everything you have to do when you have to build a project. You can literally mock out what you need, and then you can always come back to it. And that sometimes is really difficult to do in just plain JavaScript because of the fact that most of the frameworks don't really work that comfortably, at least with my experience. So, like for instance, this is actually really great if you want to go ahead and start a brand new project and you had a designer. You can show the designer, like, she can show you or he can show you the steps that they want to basically come out. There's just screenshots, and then you can literally just build out the routes and then add the actual screenshots on the page. So this way you and her can sit down and say, where things can go and where things can't go. And then if there's a problem, like maybe, there's something that they can't do, you can explain right then and there. And from that particular routing, like skeleton piece that you already build up, you can build on top of that. So that's some of the things I think is great with Angular. So after you work with this particular project, I can actually take this and actually can work on it with something else, which is something that I don't really find too easily. For instance, just on updating the project from one to another. So thanks a lot.